That's flagrantly disrespectful to the old guard. Larry Bird wasn't skilled.
To Magic.
Isaiah Thomas was one of the greatest skilled guards in the history of basketball.
If you look at the history of the game, every decade's different. The game changes. They always try to compare players now to back in the 80s and 70s, and which you cannot do. It's a whole different ball game.
Garth Gilmore told me one time, he played for Chicago, he said, if you expect to play a long time in this league, you better quit mopping up the floor. And I thought, well, he's crazy, because that's what basketball is all about.
Anthony Edwards sparked a firestorm across the NBA when he claimed that players from the 1980s lacked skill and suggested that only Michael Jordan stood out from that era, a comment many saw as a direct shot at legends like Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, and Isaiah Thomas. The backlash was immediate, with former players and analysts accusing Edwards of disrespecting the generation that built the modern NBA. But before deciding whether Edwards has a point, it's worth looking at what Larry Bird actually accomplished. From his legendary confidence to the countless stories told by opponents who were left helpless against him, Bird's career is filled with examples of elite skill that challenge Edwards' claim. And perhaps no story captures that better than the famous night in Phoenix, when Bird turned the game into a personal showcase and left an entire bench stunned. As this debate rages on, one question remains. Did Anthony Edwards expose a weakness in basketball's past, or did he underestimate one of the greatest and most skilled?
Didn't watch it back in the day, so I can't speak on it. They say it was tougher back then than it is now, but I don't think anybody had skill back then. Michael Jordan was the only one that really had skill, you know what I mean? So that's why when they saw Kobe, they were like, oh my God, but now everybody has skill.
Anthony Edwards just started a war between generations. The Timberwolves superstar shocked the basketball world when he suggested that players from the 1980s weren't nearly as skilled as today's stars, even implying that Michael Jordan was the only player from that era who truly stood out. In a single comment, Edwards questioned the legacies of Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, Isaiah Thomas, and the legends who helped build the NBA into what it is today. The response was swift and brutal. Hall of Famers, former players, and analysts immediately pushed back, accusing Edwards of disrespecting an entire generation of greatness. But before you decide who's right, you need to understand exactly who Larry Bird was. This wasn't just a great player. It was a man whose confidence terrified opponents before games even started, a player who could predict exactly where he was going to score and still nobody could stop him. From legendary trash talk to unforgettable performances, Bird repeatedly proved why he remains one of the most feared competitors in basketball history. And nothing captures it better than the famous night in Phoenix, when he turned an NBA game into a personal masterpiece and left an entire opposing bench speechless. So was Anthony Edwards exposing a truth about basketball's evolution, or did he make the mistake of underestimating one of the most skilled players the game has ever seen? Let's take a...
That's flagrantly disrespectful to the old guard. Larry Bird wasn't skilled.
To Magic.
Isaiah Thomas was one of the greatest skilled guards in the history of basketball. Magic Johnson was 6'9", a 6'9" point guard. We had never seen anything like it.
Many people saw Edwards' comments as more than just criticism. They saw them as outright disrespect toward the legends who built the game. But that was only the beginning. The strongest response came from someone who didn't just watch Larry Bird from afar, but actually competed against him and witnessed his greatness firsthand. And what this former rival said completely changed the conversation. Instead of debating whether Bird was skilled, they placed him in a category reserved for the greatest basketball minds and talents the sport has ever seen. It was a kind of perspective that made Edwards' comments seem far less convincing and raised an important question. Did he truly understand who Larry Bird was and what he meant to the game?
Best basketball players I've ever seen in my life are Michael Jordan and then Larry Bird, and I think it's very, very close.
Not LeBron, not Kobe, not Magic. When people who actually battled Larry Bird night after night talk about the greatest players they've ever seen, Bird's name ends up in a conversation occupied by only one other man, Michael Jordan. And not by a wide margin, either. That's what makes Anthony Edwards' comments so shocking. Edwards suggested Jordan was the only truly skilled player from that era, yet the players who lived through it tell a completely different story. They insist Bird possessed a level of skill, basketball IQ, shooting, passing, and competitive fire that was every bit as rare as Jordan's. And that's where this debate gets really interesting. Because when you break down Bird's game through a modern lens, it becomes clear that his skill set wouldn't just translate to today's NBA, it might be even more devastating. In a league built on spacing, shooting, and decision-making, Larry Bird wouldn't be trying to keep up with a modern game. he'd be
If the three-point shot was what it is today, back in the 80s, Bird would have scored 50 a game. He won every three-point shooting contest he ever was involved in. He made every mid-ranger in the world. He was a 90% free throw shooter. I don't recall ever a big shot in a big game that he ever missed.
The argument for Larry Bird goes far beyond nostalgia. This was a player who entered three-point contests and walked away with a trophy every single time. A deadly shooter, an elite passer, and a career 90% free throw marksman, Bird possessed the exact skills that today's NBA values most. In fact, many former players and analysts believe that if he played in the modern era, with more spacing, more three-point opportunities, and rules designed to favor offense, his numbers would be even more unbelievable. That's what makes Anthony Edwards' comment so controversial. While Edwards argues that today's game is filled with unprecedented skill, Bird supporters believe his talent would not only translate to the modern NBA, it would thrive at a level few players could match. And perhaps the most incredible part is that Bird himself never doubted it for a second. His confidence was legendary. Before one famous three-point contest, while the greatest shooters in basketball sat quietly preparing for battle, Bird walked into the locker room, looked around the room, and delivered a line so cold, so arrogant, and yet so justified, that it instantly became one of the most iconic moments in NBA history. What he said next perfectly explains why so many people still consider him one of the most skilled players to ever touch a basketball.
Well, it wasn't a big deal. It's just that it's a very somber locker room. Pretty quiet. Guys a little nervous. A lot of the guys that was in the competition were great shooters, but they were bench players. I said it just to break the ice, but I didn't think it would ever leak out there. But truthfully, I meant it. I mean, I knew I was probably going to win the contest.
Bird didn't walk into those three-point contests hoping to win. He walked in expecting to win. Before the competition even started, he famously looked around a room filled with the greatest shooters in basketball and asked a simple question: which one of you is finishing second? Then he stepped onto the court and backed up every word. That wasn't empty trash talk.